Welcome to Saulcast. Today, we're talking about Season 5, Episode 4 of Better Call Saul, titled Namaste. I'm Gil.
I'm Adam.
I'm Alun.
Let's get into it. So, Season 5, Episode 4 began with Jimmy in some sort of an antique store, and he kept picking up different heavy objects, sort of using them as a little kettlebell, kind of testing them. So when you all saw this with absolutely no context, Adam, what did you think was going on here?
I knew that he was plotting something, as probably everyone did. I really didn't know what he was planning to do with them. I mean, it seemed like he was practicing throwing them or seeing what it would feel like to throw them. So I think he was looking for something heavy enough that it would achieve whatever result he was looking for, but still something he could throw.
Yeah, same.
When we first saw him walk in, I thought maybe it was a flashback to some sort of Slippin' Jimmy antics, where maybe he was going to slip in the store and break something and then try to sue them or threaten to sue them for breaking his arm. Then when he started picking stuff up, I realized he was looking for something that would come in handy later, and we would find out later in the episode exactly what it was for.
Now, it's been a long time since the phrase Slippin' Jimmy has been spoken on this show, or on Better Call Saul, not on Saulcast. But is that where it comes from? Was that the con he would pull something to do with him slipping?
Right as I said that about him falling down in the antique store, I started to wonder that myself. I was like, is that where that came from? And I can't remember now. It seems like it would be that, though, right?
The origins of his name shall remain a mystery.
What's up, Saulcasters? This is Gil from the future. I'm editing the episode right now, and normally I wouldn't cut in to interrupt with something like this, but I thought we sounded a little too dumb not remembering the origins of the name Slippin' Jimmy. So I just wanted to confirm that, yes, in episode 1 of Better Call Saul, Jimmy reveals that back in his days living in Cicero, Illinois, during the winters, he would slip on ice, threaten to sue, and make money, sometimes up to $8,000 from one slip and fall. Anyway, back to the show. But from there, we see Jimmy and Kim in bed, nude, by the way. I think this is the most nude we've ever seen Jimmy before.
Yes, finally the audience got what it wanted.
Well, we never saw Jimmy nude. We're seeing Saul nude.
Well, his friends call him Jimmy.
I don't want to body shame.
No.
But, okay, no, never mind.
Well, Jimmy and Kim talk before going to work, and Kim says, yesterday was a bad day. Today, I'm going to fix it. And we see her clean up some glass from all the bottles they threw in the last episode. And to me, this scene really underlined the flip-flopping that we always see Kim do. Right? We see her throw bottles, we see her get involved in Slippin' Jimmy or Saul antics, and then she wants to go back to being moral and good Kim. This scene underscored that literally, where yesterday she tried to win over what's the guy's name? Acker.
Mr. Acker.
She tried to manipulate Mr. Acker, and then today she's going to try and have a better day. And then metaphorically, she broke a bunch of glass, and then today she's cleaning it up.
Also notice that when they walked past the broken glass, Saul said, don't worry, that's what you pay rent for. Which is just it shows you the difference there are many differences in attitudes toward things. He feels, it's not, even though we did it, we're paying our fair share. Someone else should clean it up.
Right. It underscores the level of personal responsibility that Kim wants to take on versus Saul. So in court, or in one of those police interrogation rooms, Jimmy meets up with the 50% off guys. And he's talking them through the strategy, thinks he can get them down to a pretty small amount of jail time. And they scoff at his price, and they want to go for one of the free lawyers, especially after Saul reminds them that they can't use the stolen money to pay him. He threatens to walk away and gives them a talking to about what you get with a free lawyer. They relent. They decide to go with him, and he reminds them that his wire information is on the back of his card. So where do you guys think this 50% off storyline is going? It feels a little bit like so far they've mainly been comedic relief, a little bit of showing us the damage caused by incentivizing crime and telling people 50% off is going to slightly incentivize people to commit more crimes. But do we think this is going somewhere bigger, or is it really just going to be them showing up here and there for these fun scenes with Saul?
At minimum, I think we will learn more about the ways that Saul makes connections. When we first met him in Breaking Bad, he seemed like someone who had a deep contact list full of very interesting people with special abilities. And I think we might at least see the details of how he finds a fake rehab for them.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he basically told them that you're going to have court-ordered rehab, but don't worry, I'll be able to find you a place. Or he always speaks in hypotheticals, which I love. There may be a place where it's not so bad, or you can kind of get away with drugs or whatever.
I think his interaction with them also shows his evolution of learning his value. I think especially after dealing with the mobsters or whatever they are beforehand. Now, I feel like in the past, if they pulled that 50% off crap on him, he would have been like, you're right. I'll take off 50% as long as you go with me. And this time he stood up for himself. He's like, that was 50% off.
Right. And I also think going along with that, he is using Saul tactics on his own client to a degree. Getting up, walking away from the table, saying all that stuff about the value that you won't get from a free lawyer. He's probably right to a certain degree, but he is manipulating them to go with him as their lawyer. So I think this is a gentle reminder that he's not always, quote unquote, sticking up for the little guy, where he's using all of his dirty tricks against, Goliath. In this case, we're seeing him use his tricks against his own client. You could argue it's for their own good, but that's sort of up to them to decide.
I think Saul does still feel a sense of personal responsibility for his clients, and those guys wouldn't have gone on the reckless bender that they did if not for his 50% off guarantee. Now, they probably would have done other things, but it might not have been this big event that they had. And so I think he doesn't want to let I think if they negotiated harder, he probably wouldn't have totally walked out on them. But I do feel like he doesn't want to leave them hanging, and he does know that he can get them out of this better than anyone else can.
Yeah, it could be. I have no doubt that's part of his motivation. It'll be interesting to see what he does with other clients, to see if it leans more towards he's really fighting for them versus where I viewed this a little bit more cynically, that he's more fighting for himself here. But we'll have more examples to try and parse that out. So then we see Saul go to lunch with Howard. And at lunch, Howard basically tells him he should have hired him. He apologizes and says he thinks it's time to correct that missed opportunity. And he offers Jimmy a job at HHM, or is it HMM?
HHM.
HHM, that's right. He said, and it seems like he genuinely thinks that there's room for Jimmy there. We can use someone like you. He calls back to the old nickname he gave him, Charlie Hustle. And Saul clearly is not very interested in this. He tells Howard he'll think about it. Howard drives away after giving him a hug, and we see Howard's license plate, Namaste, which is the name of the episode. Now, in the instant take, we talked about what's Howard's motivation here. And I think it's a mix, right, of feeling guilty about Jimmy, but as you both pointed out, he also does see a legitimate benefit to having Jimmy working for him. I think he's seeing how successful Jimmy is able to be in court and working with clients. And then Jimmy's side of the equation, I think there's not even... Do you think there's any interest there whatsoever, or he's blatantly not even remotely interested in going to work there?
I thought he was uninterested until Howard got to the end of his pitch when he told him, you're smart, you're scrappy, you're a go-getter. And he looked really intense and serious about it. And I believed his conviction about it. And that's when Saul kind of started like really chugging his alcohol, and he actually seemed like he was contemplating it, or he didn't know what to do. That said, later in the episode, we see him trashing Howard's car. That doesn't mean he doesn't want a job with him anymore, but it makes me think that what I saw in Saul's face had nothing to do with considering taking it.
Yeah, and when he trashes Howard's car, we talked about, do we think there's some bigger plot here where trashing the car is step one of a longer-term plan, or is this just a childish lashing out at Howard? And having thought about it some more, where do you fall on that?
I don't have a concrete reason for this, but the more I think about it, the more it feels in character that he would just do this to blow off some steam. And if I had to put money on it, I would bet that it's probably not part of some bigger scheme.
Alon, what do you think?
I think it's part of some bigger scheme.
Yeah.
It just seemed like he put so much thought and contemplation into it. I just can't. I just don't believe this was just him just letting out some anger.
I want to believe you're right because I love the scheming, but I don't want to get disappointed.
I was leaning towards Alon's side of this, but having thought about it some more, I definitely fall on the Adam side of the argument, where it was just a childish lashing out. And part of what solidified it for me is I remembered the Chicago sunroof incident. And there's precedent for Jimmy taking it out on someone's car in a childish way, and there not being really any more to it than that.
But that can be just, a right at the moment decision, split of the moment decision. This, he went to the store, he weighed the different objects, he took his time on this. I could see like in a split second him being like, there's a car, I gotta do this right now.
I can't find a bathroom.
What? Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if it leads anywhere else. My feeling is that we haven't seen the end of, of course, we haven't seen the end of the interaction between Jimmy and Howard. But the way I'm reading it is that Jimmy, he trashed his car. He saw the Namaste license plate, which pissed him off. Yeah. Trashed the car, and he's moved on. I think Howard hasn't moved on. I think for Howard, it's going to be, I think his mind is going to go to, I bet Jimmy did this. And maybe he'll confront him.
Given the long hug at the end of their meeting and the Namaste license plate, I do think Howard is struggling and has probably, I think he did mention seeing a therapist in the last season, and it seems like he's trying to chill out and have a more calm mind. And I bet he's still pretty traumatized about everything that happened with Chuck.
Yeah, and I'm sure having a couple bowling balls thrown at his car will help with that calm state.
Now, what for you guys, what would personally be worse? Having a Chicago sunroof performed on your car or having all those bowling balls thrown at it?
Chicago.
Because I think the latter would definitely be more expensive to fix, but the first one is really disgusting.
I don't want to sit in a car that went through the Chicago sunroof.
Yeah.
Yeah, even if you clean that out, you'll always know.
And remember, the guy's kids were in the car, right? And that was why this led.
Oh, what? Wait, really?
I think, wasn't that the storyline? Is that he did it and didn't realize there were kids in the car?
Oh,
and
my
then he
God.
got
Remember that.
Got in a lot of legal trouble.
What if Howard's kids were in the car when Saul was destroying it?
Oh, my God.
Well, that's his negligence on Howard's part. Kids, you're sleeping in the car tonight. We'll continue to monitor the Howard car situation. We'll see. Howard might Chicago sunroof Jimmy in retaliation. All right, we'll leave this.
Jimmy's car, not Jimmy.
All right, well, Kim is at Mesa Verde, and during the conversation, during the meeting, you can see that she's distracted. In the meeting, she brings up the whole Acker situation, or she doesn't bring it up directly. She tells them, hey, we considered this other lot and we decided not to go there. Here are some reasons you should reconsider. They are not at all up for the idea. I think they can read right through her that she's doing this to protect Mr. Acker, and they say, Kim, we chose a lot. That's what we're doing. Move on. You can tell she is not happy with that answer. Now, watching this scene made me wonder how much longer are they going to put up with this from Kim? Now, I don't think she's done anything overtly consequential to them, and it seems a lot worse to us because we see her internal struggle a lot more than they do. But I think she's getting more and more of the sideways glances of where do your priorities really lie? And I wonder if it's going to get to a point where it's, Kim, we need you to focus here enough. Do you think we're getting to a point where there's going to be some consequences, or does it just seem worse for me because I'm seeing her internal struggle and I know this is a big problem for her?
I do think it's getting worse, and if things stay like this, they're probably going to have to confront her about it, or because it's being done through a firm, it's not Kim handling it on her own. They might want a different lawyer put on it. That said, Kim, by the end of the episode, we know she's planning something. She comes to Saul for some help, and we don't know what it is she's planning. So any speculation about what happens with this project might be totally moot based on whatever that ends up being.
Yeah, that's true. The internal struggle they're seeing in her misprioritization is going to be overshadowed by whatever antics she's planning with Saul, assuming they're able to see through it and figure out that she's kind of behind it. Well, Kim goes to court to watch Jimmy, and we see Saul use a pretty cool switcheroo trick where he asks the defendant, or not the defendant, he asks the witness, pointing at a guy, saying, "Is that the criminal?" He says, yes, that's the guy who committed this crime. And Jimmy asks multiple times, "Are you sure?" And then he says, "Well, that's not the guy because I switched him with another person. You can't even recognize him right here." And he tells the judge, "You fell for it too." So Jimmy gets called into chambers. Kim sits there and waits for him. When Jimmy gets out, he says that he got the mistrial, which is exactly what he wanted. Kim kind of gives a half smile, shakes her head. And as always, we get to one of these moments where we think, is Kim going to be pissed at Jimmy? Or is this one of the times where she's decided she's happy with his tricks? And this is one of those times. She tells Jimmy that she needs his help. So I thought this scene was entertaining, just to see Saul up to his Saul Goodman tricks. But I think this scene's less about Saul. It's really more about Kim, right? Where we're wondering which way she's going to go. We see it. She asks for help. And kind of a similar question as I asked in the last scene, but how many more times are we going to see this back and forth struggle with Kim? Where in one scene, she's giving Jimmy a hard time. In another scene, she wants his help again. Because we're getting close to the end game here, right? This is almost halfway through the second to last season. Where are we going with Kim? Is she going to decide, this is the way I am, I'm on Jimmy's side? Or is this internal struggle going to continue? Maybe it'll evolve in some way, through to the end of the series.
Wait, we're almost halfway through. How many episodes are in this season?
You get 10 episodes a season. This was episode 4. So presumably, unless we get an extra long final season, we've got 16 episodes left.
Okay. I think we're not that close yet to... I think we're all expecting some climax in that plot to happen that either severs their relationship or something, or screws over Kim. Who knows? And I don't think we're that close to it yet. I think that's going to be something that happens closer to the end of the series.
Yeah, I think every time she recruits Jimmy for his help, I always think this could be the landmine. One of these could spiral out of control, get her in trouble. And so that takes us to the next scene where Saul goes to Mr. Acker's home, shows him the photo of the man with the horse.
Stooping.
And that's what wins over Acker for Saul to become his lawyer. Presumably for Saul to help Acker fight against Goliath, which in this case is Mesa Verde. So I have to wonder if this is the landmine. Is this the one where it seems like it's all in good fun, right? It's got a funny picture involved. But this is Kim working against Mesa Verde, a very large client. So this could be the landmine that goes off and really messes things up for Kim and her career.
But is she actually working against Mesa Verde?
To be fair, we don't know.
Do we know that she definitely thinks that Mr. Acker is in the right? Like, I think we know that she legally is aware that he's in the wrong here. And I think in her ideal world, he's able to keep his house and Mesa Verde is able to get this project completed just using the other lot, which she's rationalized is just as good. But let's say that they remain unwilling to use the other lot. Does that mean she's going to have to choose Mr. Acker, or does she see some other way out of this?
So your question is basically her sending Saul to work with Mr. Acker. Is she sending Saul to help Mr. Acker fight Mesa Verde, or does she have something else up her sleeve? Is basically what you're. So, yeah. I mean, I read it as, at a minimum, they're convincing Mr. Acker that they're going to fight with him against Mesa Verde. The Mesa Verde logo is a horse, which is why that picture makes sense. So at least they've convinced him of that. Unless they have something really clever up their sleeve, I'm reading this as they're going to fight against Mesa Verde, and I don't know how Kim's going to pull that off. But they might have.
Maybe this might be me hoping that Kim can be a little bit smarter than this. But I hope that she's trying to get Saul to help the guy fight just enough so that he's willing to accept a certain payout and then leave.
Yeah, could be. Olin, any thoughts on where this is going?
I have a feeling that Kim and Saul are teaming up here to actually truly fight for Mr. Acker. And I think that Saul is going to figure out a way to beat Mesa Verde, and Mesa Verde will have to go with the other lot.
Yeah.
And I think then Mesa Verde and her company are going to be really pissed at her because I think they know that she's with Saul, and this is all going to blow up on her. But at least Mr. Acker will get to keep his house.
Yeah, I lean towards that, and I think we've seen Jimmy pull different tricks out from his sleeve and get away with it a few times. And so I just wonder, is he going to get away with it one more time, or is this the one that blows up? We'll see.
If that is what they're doing, then it's curious that they made Mr. Acker somewhat unlikable. And we would be more on Kim's side if we liked him more.
How do you feel if the next episode we see Jimmy call up Mike and he goes, "Hey, Mike, I got a job for you. I need you to take out
someone
this,
needs to go to Belize."
Oh, I thought they would. I thought maybe he would have Mike sitting in the seat in court and be like, "Is this Mr. Acker? Are you sure? Is that Mr. Acker?" Well, I actually switched them.
And it's like, so?
Jimmy, do you have any understanding of what's going on right now?
Yeah.
And the next we see of Saul is him at Howard's house throwing the bowling balls, which we pretty much already talked about. So any other thoughts on Jimmy or Kim in this episode?
Kim's got to pick a moral leaning already. Either be good or bad. Pick one.
Yeah. I think she's going to pay dearly for not picking one, or at least for not picking the good side.
No half measures.
Yeah.
I think that she can't pick one so long as she's still with Saul I think she is naturally inclined toward the good, but she can't actually commit to it so long as she's with Saul, because every time she makes an exception for what Saul does, or every time she decides that the ends justify the means, she's making a compromise on her more basic views, and so it just weakens her overall position.
Right. And just to add one more thing to that, I would just modify what you said slightly, that yes, her natural instinct is towards good, but part of her also gears towards the bad side, and that's part of what I think attracts her to Jimmy. So it just makes it extra difficult for her to let go of that part of herself because now it's also intertwined with somebody that she loves. Well, I think that's it for Jimmy and Kim this episode. Let's check in on Gus.
Gus and his loyal sidekick, Lyle, who's, I guess, like the manager at the Pollos Hermanos, or he's of the underlings, he's the head underling.
Right.
And everyone leaves for the day except Lyle has to stay. And Gus points to the fryer, and everything looks pretty spotless and well organized. And he says, "Is this acceptable to you?" And Lyle's like, you can tell he's very afraid of him. But he says, I'm not really seeing anything. And Gus says, I understand. But then Lyle basically says, okay, now that I look closer, okay, yeah. and basically he has to just stay late and start cleaning stuff that already looks pristine.
Right.
And we know that this is happening in the context of Gus's plan to have them do the drop, which is going to intentionally be spotted by the DEA. That's happening simultaneously. And Gus, I think, is more nervous than we've seen him in a long time.
Yeah, it's funny to take a character like Gus, who's so intelligent, so calm and collected. What happens to a guy like that when he's nervous? And now we have our answer. He takes it out on poor Lyle.
Yeah, and I think it's less about Lyle and more about the cleaning and the organization. So I think if Lyle weren't there, Gus would and we know that Gus just does it himself if Lyle's not there. And even this happens later in the episode, but once the guy leaves and he says it's acceptable, Gus has to make a few more adjustments.
Yeah. Do you recall, have we seen the obsessive cleaning of things from Gus before? I'm trying to remember back to Breaking Bad or even earlier in Better Call Saul if we've seen this characteristic of his in the past.
Not cleaning so much as organization. Like even earlier in that scene when he has a cell phone on the table and he's waiting for it, it's like perfectly centered. There's almost nothing else on his desk. The last thing he does before he dies, when half his face is blown off, is adjust his tie.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I think I wrote in my notes when I was watching this scene, I've never hated Gus more than right now, just because of how he was treating Lyle. I mean, he's obviously done worse things, but usually we've seen him do stuff to people that are part of the drug trade and they're in the cage with him. But this guy Lyle, he's just trying to do a good job, and to see that get exploited to the point where he's keeping this kid here late, instead of just leveling with him and saying, "Look, Lyle, I gotta be honest with you. DEA's after me. I got a big thing going on tonight."
Lyle was sweating a lot during that scene. I was worried that every time he cleaned, he would sweat back into the fryer and he'd have to clean it again, just in an infinite loop.
Yeah. It's sort of like the Fly episode of Breaking Bad. That's something that Walt and Gus have in common is obsessiveness. Yeah,
that's true. You almost could picture, the Gus equivalent of that episode would be him and, I was about to say it would be like him and Jesse trying to clean the lab, which is exactly what that Fly episode was, essentially. Mm-hmm. Was any part of you afraid that Gus was going to get violent with Lyle?
Nah. In part because we've seen Lyle. I think we saw Lyle there in Breaking Bad too, so we know that he sticks around. And Gus seems very good at controlling his temper and just being extremely professional with people.
I was waiting for him to pull out a box knife.
A box cutter?
Box cutter, yeah.
Cutter, yeah.
Yeah. So that was, I felt bad for Lyle too. I feel like most of us have been in situations that felt a little bit like that at some point. Next, we cut to Hank and Gomi doing what I'm sure you know is something that I've always wanted to do. A nice stakeout.
Adam loves stakeouts. Or he's never been on a stakeout, but it's on his list, his bucket list.
I want to
being quarantined right now feels a little bit like it, which is fun, and I'm enjoying it so far.
I want a thermos of soup.
Yeah, I'm not a big huge soup person, but I'd love to go there I'd love to do a stakeout and have like a huge thermos full of coffee.
Oh yeah.
And some jerky.
Yeah, maybe a sandwich wrapped up in a lunchbox.
What are we talking about? So yeah, that looked like fun. I love seeing Hank and Gomez doing their thing, and it's also because they're such likable characters. It's really a relief knowing that they can't die in this series.
Right.
And yeah, so it's just fun to watch them operate, and I'm glad we got to see them again. They have some funny banter about culverts. And Hank makes a joke that it's a Dutch word for crotch rot. Which, I mean, what exactly is crotch rot?
So I looked up what a culvert is. The other one, crotch rot, I'm not really interested in Googling that or learning any more about that besides what I just imagine it to be in my head.
So what is a culvert? Is it just like that kind of drainage thing?
It's the big drainage thing, yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
It's a tunnel carrying a stream or open drain under a road or railroad. Culvert.
Huh. And I think that was the same area where Nacho threw the pills off the bridge to hide the evidence that he was trying to kill Hector.
Oh, okay.
Remember that?
Yep.
I think he threw that into the water, and also I'm pretty sure he was being watched at the time. So this is kind of an important nexus of events here.
It's an important culvert.
It's an important culvert. It's culvert is Dutch for important place. And so Gus, he's nervous. He keeps kind of looking at his phone. Lyle is still cleaning. He's sweating. Eventually, Gus lets him leave, says it's acceptable. And we see the chase start. So after they spot one of Gus's guys performing the drop, he manages to basically flee on foot, but still get spotted and make it back to his getaway car. But they do say, Hank does announce that they arrested 3 people and collected $700,000. And I think our interpretation is that one guy was supposed to escape and those other 3 were supposed to get arrested. And those are probably 3 people that are either very trustworthy or don't know anything.
Right, and it'll be interesting to see if we hear more about those 3 people. If we don't hear about them, I think the assumption is yes, they were pawns that were kept far enough away from the inner workings of Gus's world that them being in prison isn't really a liability. Mm-hmm. If they are a liability, do they get killed by Gus? Does he kill his own people? Does he send Mike after them? It'd be interesting to see.
And Gus must be furious, too, because he has to do all of this essentially to protect Crazy 8. And really, it's because he has to do all these things that help his nemesis just so that he can maintain the insider of Nacho.
That's right. Yeah, he's basically protecting Nacho. And I guess this tells us how valuable he thinks Nacho is. Three soldiers and $700,000.
Right, which also tells us that I don't think Nacho's getting out of this very easily.
No, I don't think so.
And that's about it for that thread. So moving on to Mike now.
Well, one more thing I wanted to say about that, and I think we talked a little bit about this on the Instant Take, but one of the things we said when we saw Hank is we like spending time with Hank, but we also want to learn a little bit more about him. And I think this episode did start to show us a side of him we didn't see a whole lot of in Breaking Bad, which is his leadership style. He's disappointed with this bust. They got 3 people and $700,000, but they're very low-level people. So he feels like they're not really any closer to the bigger bust of getting to Gus or somebody more in a leadership position in the drug organization. So
Hank is naturally pretty skeptical, and throughout Breaking Bad, his superiors kind of thought he was being paranoid and almost conspiracy theorist minded. So the tone of his voice when he seems kind of disappointed, I actually felt that he was considering that this might have been staged.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that, but I think as soon as you said that, that made a lot of sense to me. I think he's smart enough to pick up on it. We saw hints of that in the previous episode when he's talking to Saul and Crazy 8. He gets the feeling that something is being staged here. So I think he has that instinct.
Yeah.
And then my favorite thing is that even though he's disappointed, he puts on a good face for his team, gives a speech about, we did a great job today. First round's on me. We're going to O'Brien's.
That's right. Look, wouldn't it be so tempting to take some of that money?
No, not for me. I have a lot of morals. I'm not like Kim or Jimmy.
Slippin' Gilly.
Mike shows up to babysit. And all right, here's what I'm wondering is did he get a call, a voicemail asking him to babysit, but he didn't answer, but then he just kind of showed up and she already found someone else, right?
Right. Well, I think she was calling him basically to say, I don't need you to babysit. And he ignored the voicemails, didn't answer, and then just decided to show up anyway. I think I don't remember the exact mechanics of it, but I believe he showed up knowing that she was not expecting him there and that he was not supposed to be babysitting that night.
Okay. And she does what would probably be a really hard thing to do in her position, but a good thing, which is she tells him to sit out, that she has a babysitter already and that she doesn't need him, and that it might be better if he doesn't babysit for a little while. And he's really hurt by this. His voice is kind of shaking, and he basically says, like, I scared her. I lost my temper. That's it.
He says it'll be fine, and she brings up, what if she mentions your son again? And he doesn't really have a response to that.
Yeah. And I think the same thing would probably happen again.
Yeah.
So she's doing the right thing here, even though it's probably pretty difficult.
Well, and knowing his granddaughter, by the way, she probably would bring it up again.
Yeah, because she's a little punk. And speaking of little punks, Mike, who is broken up about this, later that night does the same thing he did before, where he's walking at night, basically just looking for trouble. This time, I think he intentionally goes to that area where I guess it's just they like to hang out in their front yard by that fence in the middle of the night on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So when he makes it look like he's just trying to walk through, he knows he's going to get accosted when he's walking through there, or they're at least going to mess with him. So it almost seemed like Rambo, where like Rambo's just trying to make his way through this town or something, and everyone just keeps screwing with him. Right? They drew first blood.
Right.
And at first I was excited because I was like, maybe Mike brought a gun with him or is planning to just kill all of them, which would have been really satisfying. But actually, he just gets the crap beat out of him.
Yeah.
He puts up an okay fight for a second, but
one guy against that group of people, that would be pretty uneven odds, especially
not for John Wick.
I knew you were going to say that.
Right, maybe Mike could have done it when he was younger.
Yeah. Or if he brought a weapon of some kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was probably drunk, and also I think he wanted to get beat up.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he didn't care about the consequences. I think he probably even knew there's a chance he could get killed, but his life feels so meaningless when he doesn't have Kaylee to look after or to feel responsible for her.
Right.
And at the same time, right now, Gus doesn't need anything from him. So if he's not, he needs a job. It's like, there's some dog breeds that like they have to have a job to do. Mike is like that, and without a job, he just looks for trouble.
Right. Well, and we said in the previous episode that when he broke the other guy's arm or dislocated his shoulder, this scene is telling us this is his outlet. He is learning that when things aren't going well, he's miserable. Going and getting in a fight is how he's going to deal with that. Immediately in the next episode, we see something go wrong. He's being kicked out and not being allowed to babysit his granddaughter. Immediately, he goes looking for trouble. This is the equivalent of if you get mad and you punch your wall. For Mike, that's not enough. You get mad, you go and find a bunch of hooligans.
And those hooligans ended up stabbing him. And right after, we see him wake up in a strange house. And you immediately know that it's probably in Mexico because everything looks yellow.
Yeah.
It's a classic motif in this show. Where do you think he is?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a much more solid answer than I had a few days ago, which is somebody stepped in and saved him and brought him somewhere remote to recuperate, stay out of trouble. Only person I can think of who would do that is Gus. He has a vested interest in keeping Mike if he wants to continue to work with him. So I'm assuming Gus has had somebody following Mike. They saw him getting into trouble, and they saved him.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And I think that the place they may have taken him to could be the same doctor that Gus went to after his self-poisoning trick that he did in season 4 of Breaking Bad.
Can you remind us of that? I don't remember that entirely.
Yeah, so he poisoned the tequila that to basically mark the beginning of a deal with the cartel and Don Eladio. But actually, it was part of his revenge. Do you remember Jesse was there watching the whole thing happen?
Yeah.
And so Gus takes something beforehand to try to counteract some of the effects of the poison. And then right after he takes the shot, he goes to the bathroom and makes himself throw up. But he's still really sick, and he starts walking basically on his own through the desert, I think with Jesse.
Yeah.
To get to the doctor. And so that's the only doctor in Mexico that I can think of that has ties to Gus. So that's where I think he is.
Damn. I think you're probably right. Very solid prediction. And I forgot about that whole situation, but that is super. That
was one of the coolest. That was one of the coolest scenes in Breaking Bad. Like, as bad as Gus is, you couldn't not like him after that.
Yeah. I also wanted to say the cinematography of that knife getting pulled, I thought was pretty awesome because the fight just escalates like that. You see the knife and then stab, flash to black. I think if this were Breaking Bad, it would have gone to black and that would have been the end of the episode. But here, you can't have a cliffhanger because we know he lives. And so I'm glad they didn't play with that. They just went right to him waking up.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And we know that Mike is important to Gus. I wonder if whoever's surveilling him, if they did anything about the hooligans or they just waited for them to run away before grabbing Mike.
Yeah.
You know, what if they just disposed of all of them?
Yeah, it's possible, and that could be one more. I'm assuming Mike won't feel great about that the next day because he probably wanted to beat him up a little bit, break a few fingers maybe. I don't know if they deserve to be executed. We don't really know anything about these people. So if they are dead or grievously injured, good riddance. I'm assuming Mike will feel a little bit not great about that.
It's really interesting to see how Gus invests in people. He sees potential. He did it. He's done it with so many different people now, and he's got these go-to guys that he relies on. And so we see him protecting Mike, but obviously it's only for his own purposes. We see him protecting Nacho, again, for the same reason. During Breaking Bad, Gus had Mike intentionally try to help Jesse gain more confidence and become more professional.
Yep.
He also helped Gale from very early on.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's all just an investment for him, then for that reason it makes sense that his cover career is what it is because it's basically it involves managing people.
Yeah. No, really good point. Yeah. I think
So he's a good manager.
Yeah.
As long as you're not the one being managed by him. Any other thoughts on Gus and Mike?
No,
Right.
I think we haven't had a cliffhanger like this in a while where it's literally, where is he? What's going to happen next? So it'll be interesting to see how that resolves itself, and look forward to seeing more of Hank. I wonder, when I heard he was going to be in the season, I thought maybe it's an episode or two, but it does seem like he's sticking around, and so I'm very curious to see how they've always been so good at bringing back familiar characters where you think you know where it all ends up, but still finding a way to make it interesting. And so I'm curious to see how it evolves in this season.
Yeah. And one thing we know is that Mike needs a job to do. And I think the fallout from these events are that either this next episode or the one after, we're going to see Mike get something interesting to do, and it's probably going to be very satisfying.
Yeah, agreed. Alon, how about you? Any final thoughts on the episode?
No.
All right.
We covered everything.
That's it. All right. Well, in that case, thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to go into the Apple Podcast app, leave a rating, leave a review if you feel like it. And if you want to check out our YouTube channel, follow the link in the description. Our instant takes that we do earlier in the week get posted there, and you can see my face talking about all this. We're going to try and do them live when we can, so you're definitely going to want to subscribe and be a part of the conversation.
Get it? If you leave a review, we'll give you a shout out. So you can say something for us to repeat on the air, and as long as it's not offensive to anyone but us, then we'll say it.
Yeah, actually,
Or if you have like a Twitter handle you want us to promote or something like that, just let us know. Just put it in the review, and that's your little incentive.
And actually, speaking of which, I do want to give a shout out because I won't even read the review, but we got the nicest review I've ever seen, and it made my day. And so I want to give a shout out to Spartan Jr.
Ooh.
Spartan Jr., you're not a junior anymore. You're in the big leagues now because that was the best review I've ever read. So check that out as log into the podcast app, and you can see what Spartan Jr. wrote that made us so happy.
And here's the thing. It's actually, I think it's not that easy to review a podcast you're already subscribed to. I think instead of just clicking on Saulcast in the podcast app, you have to act as if you haven't subscribed already and then search for it. And when you found it in the podcast app, click on it, and then from when you're viewing it that way, you'll have the option to leave a review.
Hey, if Spartan Jr. can do it, you can too.
I don't know. Spartan Jr. is pretty great. These people, the rest of the listeners might not have the same intellectual capacity. But, prove me wrong.
I'm Gil.
I'm Adam.
I'm Alon.
And this is
Saulcast.
Welcome to Saulcast. Today we're talking about Season 5, Episode 4 of Better Call Saul, titled Namaste. I'm Gil.
Oh, I thought you wanted Adam
Let
to
me
say
just
it.
do it again.
Usually Adam's next.